Hey guys, it's Michael Griffin, Brianna Griffin, and we have a special guest today. Evan Jenkins is here. Evan is a young entrepreneur, does a lot of different things, has a bunch of sources of different ways to produce income for himself. And we wanted to have him on because he's interested in getting into real estate. And of course, Brianna and I are looking to produce some classes here very soon and to be able to share our knowledge to you guys as well as to Evan today. So thanks, Evan, for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here, guys. I've been watching you guys' story for a few years, so I think it's really cool how both of our fields can really mesh. So
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you guys for having me here and pick up a couple tips from the legends.
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. No, we've had previous conversations and about real estate, and you kind of want to dive in. And you're still young. How old are you?
25.
25.
Just turned 25 not too
So
long ago.
25, and you're already doing a lot. Can you tell the people like what you do?
So I day trade, do like some stuff like in investing, like stocks and cryptocurrencies and stuff, but that's more so passive. The credit field is kind of like my bread and butter. So I help people like small businesses get access to capital, or even just individuals that they can then turn into income, to passive income streams, or help people leverage credit to travel for free. Take multiple vacations every year without breaking the bank or anything. And then if people need help with, removing like late pays or repos or collections or anything like that, we kind of give them a way to clean up their credit so that they can access, everything that I teach and, get out of, essentially kind of like if they're in a rut or anything like that, or just add a second passive income stream, something they can do to cover the mortgage or, whatever they would need that money for. And then I also do, solar sales for kind of just like one of my active income streams. So that's just something I kind of do just for fun, just to pass time, because ever since I quit my job, I kind of just got real bored and just laying around the house. I needed something to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think there's some advantages to what you do, and building wealth is. The income streams that you're talking about are ways to create money, right? But what are you doing in regards to taking that money to investing into something more long term that's going to help you build wealth?
Yeah, and that's really up to the clients, me specifically. I invest into like a cash value life insurance plan. I also just invest really simply into S&P 500, and then there's a couple other things that I do, just invest into cryptos. But real estate is something that like I've always wanted to get into. But I'm friends with a lot of real estate people, and just through the grapevine, just I understand how complicated real estate is. It's kind of like reminded me, like when I first got into like either day trading, like or like cryptocurrencies, just like how many words and terms and like legal stuff, and it was just like real estate is like so much more. There's so many more moving parts than like anything else. So, my thing is, if you want to become really, really good at something, you go to the people that are already really good at it, already have results, which is why I came to you guys and asking you for real estate advice, because I don't want to go and, ask the person that's been selling real estate, no offense, but for like 2 weeks and go and ask them how to invest into real estate. But, so that's, real estate I think is a really good, just another avenue. So I already have a few long-term investment stuff, but they're very, very simple. So, and then real estate too, like you can also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can cash flow real estate, right? So you can do the income side, but then you can take that income and then, put it into properties and then just get the equity and everything. You guys would know way more than me, but that's kind of like in my mind, I'm just like, oh, cool, like you're killing two birds with one stone, So get the income and then put it into other real estate. So you're doing the cash flow and then you're doing the investment side. So that's always been like super attractive to me, to real estate. And the other thing too for real estate, everything that I'm, in solar and credit, it could be around for 10, 15, 20 years. But one thing I can guarantee is that, 100 years from now, someone's going to need a roof over their heads, So like real estate to me is just like the ultimate like investment vehicle. It's like, it's just, yeah, it just makes sense. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think ultimately that's something that we've talked about a long time. We've been together 5 years, and it really started diving into a lot of long-term rentals at that point. Before that, it was more transactionally based. We were selling real estate. We were helping other people build wealth through real estate. We're doing a little bit of that on our own, But really, we ramped up in the last 5 years of saying, okay, what's the long-term play? How much money do we need to make sure that we can retire when we want to retire with enough residual income? And so that's wealth building. And not only that, but the residual income comes in, but you also have the continued appreciation of these properties. So, 20 years from now, these things could be double, triple, quadruple the price. And then you can pass that on to your kids and their kids, and that's longevity, right? For your bloodline. So that's something we're definitely focused on, and something we feel like we do very well, and hopefully we can help people learn those traits as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because you're setting up your kids' futures right now by everything that you're doing, and then when you guys come to retire, you guys still have those passive income streams. So I think a lot of people can get stuck when they retire and they just have a fixed amount of money, but they don't have any more income. So I think everything you guys are doing is awesome. So just planning for the future, and then setting up your kids as well too. Just teaching them the steps so that then they can pass it down to your kids, and now you're really changing habits, for lack of a better term. And kind of breaking off.
For us, like, I can speak for both of us, but neither one of us, grew up with a ton of money, right? Our families were, my parents were entrepreneurs, but they always failed. It seemed like, no offense, parents, but they tried a lot and they failed a lot, and I think that when I was old enough to realize kind of their mistakes and some of the lessons they taught me about what not to do, I followed my own path and said, okay, I want to make sure that I'm not struggling and my kids don't struggle like we did. Like, we couldn't even afford milk. Like, I drank cereal. I had cereal with powdered milk when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Because we couldn't afford the milk. So it was a struggle at times, but I wanted to make sure that I needed to find a way that I can pass some stuff down to my kids, so that they don't struggle.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the same story with me, or a similar story. I just I've heard of just my family just kind of like struggling, and I just thought with me, like, I'm just like, okay, like, my family's like no longer struggling, so kind of riding that same boat that and real estate's a perfect vehicle because you can keep those homes and then pass them down to your kids when they're 16, 18 years old or something.
Probably not that soon.
No, but not that soon. Okay, well,
that sounds irresponsible.
You guys are the real estate experts, but it's kind of like the same gist or whatever year that they turn, have them set up a business. I'm assuming whatever way you guys would go about that. I just think that real estate's the perfect investment vehicle because let's look at like 50 years ago what real estate was valued at, and let's look at it now. Exactly. Versus like if people want to go like traditional investing where they invest into stocks. Let's look at, I don't know, whatever company that, boomed and then crashed. And it's real estate, I just think, is like really safe, really set up for like the long term. And that's always something that interests me, is because I always think like, okay, how do we think like 45, 50 years from now? Like, how do we think like so far ahead? And then really just kind of structure it back. And really the only answer that I have is real estate. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. At 25 years old, you're thinking about this stuff because most 25-year-olds don't. Right, most 25-year-olds are thinking about like, how do I start this career? Yeah. Right, how do I get started in making a little bit of change to afford my apartment? Yeah. Right, very few are thinking about the long-term game. So I commend you on that. And really, that's something that again we focus on a lot, is just the long term rather than the short term.
Yeah. Just asking a couple questions here. So really, I think this is an awesome opportunity for me just to answer some questions and knock out maybe some other questions that your followers might have, or your viewers and everything. But, I just don't know anything about real estate, so it's really just a pleasure sitting here. But one of the first ones that I wrote down is, for me, like someone who's never been into real estate before, like if you'd be able to get, an FHA on an investment property, and like if you can't, then like what route you guys would go to acquire an investment property. Or like what would you guys do, knowing what you guys know now, to get into your first like real estate investment?
You can in a roundabout way, and we've talked about this before, but a great way to get into real estate is, of course, step one, buying a primary residence. Okay. You can buy a primary residence with an FHA if you're a first-time home buyer, and you can buy it with as little as 3% down, which is a great entry point for a lot of buyers out there. And from there, every 2 years, because you have to, if you're buying a primary residence, you have to live in it for at least 2 years. Okay. before moving on, unless you have a justified reason. Otherwise, the lenders might question why you're moving so quickly. So if you plan to keep that property, your primary residence, as a rental property, now you have it under 3%, great interest rates, and then you move on to your next property, you rent that one out, and you can continue doing that every 2 years. And that's a very easy way of getting into the real estate market without a ton of capital. Because otherwise, if you want to just strictly buy an investment property, you have to put 20% down on a conventional mortgage.
And would you, they brought up a couple questions there. So, and then primary residence, just for people that don't know, and I don't know, what do you mean by primary residence? That's just a single family home, or like a condo, or
one that you intend to live in. So it has to be owner occupied, and it's going to be your primary residence, meaning that that is your primary place of living.
Awesome. And then the other thing that I brought up too is like, would you maybe think of, because you mentioned if you want to invest in something, you need 20% down. Well, at least with the market in Denver right now, a lot of people, at least my age, don't have 20% to put down on maybe a home. So would you think that maybe something like a condo, or like a townhouse would be something like a little bit more like easier barrier to entry, or what would be like your guys' suggestion if you wanted to do that?
Yeah, I would say condo or townhouse. It is a lower price point, right? Mm-hmm. And those are entry level homes, and so you do see a lot of people in your age or younger that do invest in those type of properties. And I think that's a great point, that a lot of people your age or maybe even a little bit older don't have the money to put down to have the 20%. But to Brianna's point, if you do a primary residence purchase, then you can put as little as 3% down and be able to purchase that home.
And then now, would you still be able to? So if you're living in the home as your primary residence, would you still be able to, without like legal wise, like fill the other rooms, to have those residents, and then still like create cash flow, or is that kind of fall under like the house hacking, like BRRR model, or whatever it is?
No, that doesn't. But you can rent additional rooms out, as long as, again, your intention is to live there yourself.
Okay.
So you can't buy something as a primary residence and get primary lending terms, because they're much more favorable.
Gotcha.
For instance, if you're putting 3% down with a 3% interest rate on a primary, you would have to put, if it's a strictly investment property, it's a 20% down, and your interest rate is probably going to be somewhere closer to 4%.
Yeah.
And that's, again, because an investment property is considered riskier than if your intention is just to live there and pay it down over time. But if you are living there, there's no regulations that say you can't rent out additional rooms within.
Yeah, you can rent out
residence.
additional rooms long-term wise, or you can do if you have a basement with a separate entrance, mm-hmm. or an ADU in the back, additional dwelling unit above a garage or something, then for us, I think you would do you would do a short-term rental, because you're going to cash flow much more in a short-term rental than you will just long-term 1-year leases for a room, or month-to-month leases for a room.
Yeah, that just like brings up a question in my mind. So kind of what I do with my clients is, whenever they want help, I always ask them to write down their goals first, because then when I look at their goals, then I can kind of structure like a plan for them. So kind of like same thing for you guys, because what you just said, you do short-term rental so they can cash flow more. But then also on the other side, we're talking about, like building up equity and stuff like that. So would you kind of do the same thing with your clients and or just ask them to write down their goals? Because I feel like there's so many different avenues that you can go, at least with like credit. If someone wants to do travel, we're not going to go and get them a whole bunch of 0% cards. We're going to tell them like what travel cards are within their score that they can get, and they can get the travel points and stuff. So it was just a point.
Yeah, no, I think we don't necessarily have people write down their goals necessarily, mm-hmm. but we do ask them what their goals are.
Yeah, and then anything for me, Bree? I mean, I've watched your growth ever since like we've known each other, and it's so cool to see like just at least where you were like.
Same. I think it's equal for you guys.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool just to see this. Yeah.
So anything for you, like anything that you like sticks out that you learned or something? Maybe like a couple books that just as a little tweak.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One for me is setting your goals really high. So everybody says set measurable, attainable goals. But to me, that's selling yourself short, because when you really push the bar higher and higher every year that I've been in real estate, I'm like, I don't think that I can double up. I don't think that I can do what I did this year. And then the next year I double up.
Yeah.
And I don't even know sometimes how I do it, but it's because I'm setting those goals so high every year. And even though I think that at the beginning of the year it's probably unattainable and I'm probably shooting for the stars and I should bring that down a little bit, I hit it every year. So I think, don't be afraid to fail, because at the end of the day, if you fail, you're still way ahead of where you were when you started at the beginning of the year. And then secondly, I'm a huge fan, as Michael said, of vision boards and truly having the vision of what it is that you want to obtain, not just having clear written goals, but having a vision that you meditate on every day is super important. And then I would say the last thing, and this is something that I really learned getting into real estate investing, and especially just observing Michael's growth over, he's been doing this for 15 years. So when I got into the game, just as you mentioned, you want to surround yourself with people who are already doing it and doing it at a high level. So that's what I did. And Michael in particular had multiple different businesses, not just in real estate, but you have to use leverage to get there. And I think that we're taught in school and in college that leverage is bad, that you don't want to have debt. But you need that debt in order to get ahead and to scale, because then I can quickly turn $100,000 into $1 million. Right. I cannot do that without leverage. Right. I just can't, because I can't even buy a single family home for $100,000. I have to combine that with leverage in order to get ahead. So increasing my risk appetite for debt and leverage, I think is super important in real estate, and it's not bad. You need it to scale.
Yeah. I think risk appetite kind of comes with getting your feet wet and everything. I remember when I first got into day trading, my risk appetite was, I didn't even know what risk appetite was. I was blowing accounts like left and right. And then I scaled it down. I lost so much money when I first started trading that it was my risk appetite was tiny. But then once I kind of started to figure it out, and then figure out leverage a little bit more, it's just, I think, one thing that you said is we're taught that leverage is bad. I just think that people just don't fully understand leverage enough to, because leveraging a home, it's to me, I think it's really intelligent if you can only put 10% down and get a property versus pay cash for the whole thing, because now you're tying up all your cash flow and then you can use that money in that whole conversation. But it's much different than I used to sell cars for 3 years, and people wanted to trade in their cars and they're upside down in them, and they're calling whenever people would say investment, they just want to put their money into a good investment. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. It's I don't even really consider a car an asset. It's just a depreciating object,
Good,
so
good debt and bad debt, right?
Good debt and bad debt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I love that answer for sure. What type of loan would be best for investing? Would you rather get a investment loan? That's probably not the correct terminology, but would you want to do hard money, and specifically for maybe a fix and flip? Because I think for me, fix and flips would be something just a hobby to me, and just something that I would just want to do for fun. And I know you're laughing, you're but
it
just sounds like a terrible way to have fun.
But specifically for fix and flips, what would your guys' route or angle be for that?
Yeah, I think specifically for fix and flips, in order to be competitive in the market, you're competing against, in this market, you're competing against homeowners a lot of the times for a crappy property. Before, that was never the case. You were only competing against wholesalers and fix and flippers. Now, since there's no inventory, regular home buyers are looking at this crappy property and say, well, I could fix it up. I just need a house. They're getting desperate. So to be competitive, I'd say get a hard money loan or private money loan, meaning that you can write that offer. It's the same as cash because you're guaranteed this money. So the hard money and private money is a little bit more expensive than a regular loan. You generally have to put anywhere between 10 and 20% down to get the hard money or private money. And the interest rate is going to be a little bit higher. So a regular loan maybe is at 4%, and a private money loan or a hard money loan may be at 8 to 10%. Also, the points up front, you would pay 1 point on a regular conventional loan. In a hard money scenario, you'd probably be paying up to 2% up front of the loan cost. So if the loan costs $500,000 for the property, $100,000 to fix it up, the total amount is $600,000. You're going to need 20% down, and you're going to be paying 2 points up front, meaning 2 points on $600,000, right? So it's a lot more expensive loan to get. However, you're able to write these offers, same as cash. So you're writing cash offers, and you can close as quickly as 2 weeks or 10 days sometimes. So it's a quick close, all cash, and that way you can be competitive.
And I'm just going to touch on that too, is always just think short-term investment, short-term debt facility. So, for a fix and flip, you can use hard money, which is a short-term, usually a 6-month facility that you're obviously going to pay back once you sell the property. Another plausible short-term debt facility to use for fix and flips could be a home equity line of credit. Because let's say you have $500,000 of equity in your home, you could tap out usually 75 to 80% of that with a home equity line of credit. And so you could also use something like that, because with a home equity line of credit, you don't have any points up front to draw on the line. It's free to draw on the line once you have the line in place. And then your outstanding interest is usually, let's say, prime plus 1. And so it's going to be a lot less than a hard money loan overall. So if you have a lot of equity in your home, that could also be a possibility to use for a fix and flip.
And that's why your primary residence can be an investment vehicle, right? Not only do you get the appreciation on your home, you're also paying the mortgage on your home, right? So you're paying down the debt on it, and then you're able to write off the depreciation on the house as well. So you're making money in several different ways, and you're writing off amounts on your taxes because you own a home. So there's a lot of advantages to that. And when you have enough equity, you could tap that, like Bree said, and use that to go buy another investment property. Which is amazing. But
I just think on a HELOC too, there's a lot of things you could do wrong. Like people will use their HELOC to buy another long-term property. And to me, that's a very bad idea, because you're using a short-term debt facility on a long-term investment. So you want to be careful with how you use your HELOC. If it's maybe on a fix and flip to add more value and you're getting that cash right back to pay it off, that's okay. But otherwise, a HELOC is interest only. So you don't even have to pay down the principal. So using that as a down payment on another property, to me, is not a great idea, because now you're also 100% leveraged.
And that HELOC is generally variable, right? It's not a fixed interest rate. So as interest rates go up, that your payments are going up because your interest is getting higher, right? So that's why it's a bad idea to use that for a long-term hold, only for a short term. If you want to do a long-term hold, just cash out, refi, pull the cash out, and put that money down on your next property.
Nice. And these are the things exactly what I was talking about, because my old roommate, he bought a house, and he was talking exactly like that. He's like, once we get enough equity in this house, I'm going to take out a home equity line of credit, and I'm just going to put it into another house. But here, like you guys are saying, like, doing that strategy is, so it's funny because I see this a lot. People who have just enough information, but they like just enough to be wrong too. So it's misinformation,
Right.
Like, let's say like someone like me, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea, right? And then, I go through, and so this is why it's like super beneficial. Like, I'm excited for you guys' course to come out. It's like, it's gonna be sweet, because you guys already have the roadmap. It's just like, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I just need to do what they do and say what they say. And
we get a lot of those comments on our social media, just like, hey, I don't know how to get started, or I heard this advice. What do you think about this advice? Somebody told me about this. Like, it's super important for people to realize, like, they should be getting their information from a real credible source, from somebody that's done it in the past, instead of just a friend that has maybe purchased one property in their life, say, go do this, right? That could be good advice, or it could be bad. You just don't know, because that person doesn't even have enough experience. So like you said, I think that the course that we're building is going to be super valuable for that information.
And it's cool too, because you guys have had like the experience, and you guys have kind of like I said, like paved the path. You guys have maybe like messed up here and there, and I say mistakes, but really they're just lessons. You never fail. You just learn, right? Unless you quit. But kind of ties back to the that one quote where it's like, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. We're shooting free throws, but you're shooting free throws the wrong way. We practice 10,000 hours of shooting wrong free throws. You're just gonna so you're not gonna get that. So
Learn it right from the beginning.
Exactly. So for me, I'm super interested in doing fix and flips, like I mentioned, kind of just something like a hobby for me. But what would it take, or what would it look like? How much money would you need to get into fix and flipping, cash flow or everything? Or what would you do? Or how much money would you need for fix and flip?
We always do 20%, and we use a hard money loan. Sometimes we will do cash on a one-off situation where it's just a really tight spread, and so we just need to buy it cash in order to remove those financing costs. But I would say 95% of the time we use hard money, and with that, we're still making at least 50% cash on cash returns. So for example, let's say you're buying a property that's $400,000 and you need $100,000 in rehab. So your all-in number is $500,000. Then if you're using a hard money loan with 20% down, you're going to need $100,000 plus some interest costs, staging, that kind of stuff. So maybe an extra 10 to 20 there. So I'd say 100 to 120 if you want to be around that price point. Of course, the higher price point you get into, the more you're going to need down. There are 10% hard money loans. We've found that 20% has just been the sweet spot for us because we get much lower interest rates at 20% down. So it reduces our financing costs and also just gives us a little bit more equity cushion in case anything were to happen. I think 10% is okay, but it's pushing it a little bit. And then some people do 100% financing where they get a private loan and they finance 100% of the purchase and the fix up, which one is going to be much more expensive, and two, it's not going to provide you much equity cushion in case something were to happen. Like something went wrong with the rehab and now you have to hold the property for a year, which has happened to us.
What would be an example of that? Because I didn't even think about that.
An example of
Just
something
like rehab?
going wrong.
Yeah. And having to hold on to a property?
Okay, well, here's one of our properties. Of the about 200 that we've done, we've lost on 4 total. So not a lot, but the ones that we have lost on are very memorable. So one of them we purchased, and the roofer pulled the permit, but he went to replace the neighbor's roof.
Not ours. He was on the wrong roof.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the neighbor came out. She got really angry, of course, and she went to the city. The city did a stop work order on us, and then from then on out, they required us to take down all of the drywall, redo stuff. I mean, it should have just been a very basic kind of cosmetic rehab, and it should have taken us 3 months, and it took us a year and like 3 months that we were holding that property before we even finished and got done with the city and went to sell it. So imagine you have 100% financing on that property at a high interest rate, let's say 10 to 12%, and now your numbers are completely thrown off because all you're doing is paying interest.
Built that balance.
The lender's
Yeah.
making some pretty good money on you at that point.
Oof.
There
Yeah.
are some private money lenders that will actually take it on the back end, though. Like, you won't have to pay them every single month. There are a select few that you can pay at a lump sum at the end when you sell it.
Nice.
But again, you're still accumulating that interest. Whether it's during the flip or at the end of the flip, you still owe it.
Yeah. So you just want to account for potential risks and what's the worst case scenario. And if you do that and say, okay, I'm at least starting with 20% equity and my interest rate's lower, you're mitigating some of that risk.
Okay. Nice, because it's kind of like the sweet spot, right? Like you're not full leverage, but you're not necessarily putting
Too much down.
50% down, where you could be using that cash flow to maybe work on like a second property. At least that's the way that I think. Like, 20%, I guess, to me would be like the sweet spot, right?
That's for us, yes. That's what's worked the best.
Well, it sounds like 20% would be the sweet spot.
It's a sweet spot, but a lot of people don't have 20%.
Yeah.
We have some guys that we kind of mentor a little bit now that they put 10% down just because they don't have the cash, which is fine. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive. You're going to make a little bit less on the back end.
And if you're putting 10% down, you want to have a bigger spread on the back end.
But to me, that would almost be like beneficial because you're still getting your feet wet. Because like to me, like as long as you break even or profit a little bit, that's better than losing money. But the experience that you gain, like for the roofer to come in and start working on the neighbor's house, I mean that's
just stuff you don't
anticipate.
Insane. Like, but
and how would you know that stuff? But
yeah,
you have to cut your teeth somewhere, right? And so I think you pay $60,000 to $100,000 to go to college. I mean, if you lost 10 grand because you learned you did messed up on a flip or something, that 10 grand is so valuable because you're going to know what not to do on the next 20 flips.
Yeah,
right.
It's a tuition to real estate investing. It's a cost of learning, but
absolutely. You're going to remember again the ones that you failed on. Yeah. When and where you fail, you're going to remember that the most, and you're going to learn the most from it.
That's crazy. That's a crazy story.
All right, so yeah, we're going to change gears a little bit. We talked a lot about real estate. I think there's a complement in what you do and what we do. A lot of people can't purchase a home in general, even if it's their primary residence, unless they have good credit.
Yeah.
So like, how do people build their credit? Like, what do you do that helps people do that?
So credit, there's a lot of misinformation out there, kind of like we were mentioning a couple minutes ago. But so with credit, they usually just learn it from whoever taught them, and you're really only as good as the person that taught you. So really big misconceptions that people get is don't have any more than like 1 to 2 credit cards, which it's all about like risk appetite too, right? So you got to kind of take this into account. But keep a revolving balance of 30% on your credit cards. But what a lot of people don't know is the other factors of credit. So 35% of your credit will be on-time payments, so no collections, repos, bankruptcies, which is kind of the obvious. 30% of your score is going to be utilization. Then the next one is going to be number of accounts, it's going to be history, and then it's going to be number of accounts, and then it's going to be inquiries or amount of new debt. So that's really just the factors, and what you can do is you can just work yourself backwards. But I think where a lot of people get stuck is people that have had credit for 2 years, but they maybe only have like 1 or 2 accounts. And by accounts, I mean, auto loan, or maybe like a mortgage or student loan or personal loan or like a credit card. That's what I mean by accounts. I don't necessarily mean credit cards, but they have 2, they maybe have like an auto loan and like a credit card for the last 2 years, but their score is still sitting around, like 660 to 690 area. So whenever they open up a new account, let's say a credit card or something, what the history does is it takes an average. So you have that 2 years. So you open up another account, your 2 years of history is going to drop back down to whatever, 1.25 years of history. So, and then you don't really have a good mix of accounts because you just have an auto loan and 2 credit cards. So what people can do to help their scores is, like, let's say that, you have cash to buy a vehicle. And I have another story for that one too. You have the cash to buy a vehicle. But what you could do is you could put, 80% down on that car, still get like a low interest rate. You get that line reporting to your credit for maybe like 3 years, get a super low interest rate. And then you have an account, and then you have a good mix of accounts too, because you have like another auto loan, and then maybe you have credit cards and maybe a personal loan. So now you're kind of tackling the different areas of credit, and then obviously pay your loans on time and your credit cards. But once you get once above a certain threshold, so to get a perfect 850, usually it's recommended to have 7 to 8 years plus of history reporting, and then over like 11 accounts, and then also to keep your utilization below 10%. So with your credit
across the board, so you
on your credit cards.
On your credit cards,
yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah. So 10%. So you have a $20,000 credit limit.
So you
keep it under $2,000 a month
before the statement balance. So one thing that you can do if you want, there's a couple different strategies that you can do to even like raise those limits. If you're able to like max out that card and pay it down before the statement balance, down below like 2,000, whatever that 10% is, ideally like right around to like 1 to 3% on that card. If you max out that card and then you pay it like 3-4 days before the statement balance, down to like 1 or 2% utilization, what that's doing is still showing that you're using that card, that you need a bigger limit. So then you can even reduce your amount of utilization as well too, and your score will just skyrocket. There's just different strategies you can do.
Just so I understand that correctly, you're saying the best way to use your credit card is to spend as much as you can and then buy it down to 1 to 2% outstanding before the payment is due.
Before the statement balance. Yeah, the statement balance is the due date. Okay. So you'll get it says your statement balance is ready. Needs to be paid in 5 to 6 days or whatever it is. But yes, you're absolutely correct. If you have a limit with a $20,000 credit card, but your bills are only, 3 to 4,000, still put the 3 to 4,000 on there, but pay it down to, 1 to 3% of 20,000 would be what, 200 to like, we'll say $500 or $600 or whatever it is. So put the 4,000, but then pay that credit card down, because what you're doing is you're using that money. So you're using that credit, which is just going to make your score really strong. And so when I was selling cars 3 years ago, I had a client who had come in, paid cash for everything, closed his credit cards, haven't used credit in 15 years. Credit Karma was saying that he was a 730. And he had a real, like a real car or something that he had for like the last like 9-10 years, but the transmission went out in it. And he didn't have a lot of money to pay cash for another car, so he needed to finance or lease. And so finally we found a car that would be good with his monthly payment to lease the car. And I was like, yeah, this is, it's going to be an easy deal. He's 730. But when we actually went to pull his credit, it was pulling up as NA because he didn't have any credit. His credit went away.
Wow.
So even if he had one credit card and he just put a transaction on it every 3 months, and it's nothing that you need to do like anything crazy. Like with the credit cards that I don't use, I just put a transaction, like maybe a pack of gum or something every 3 months just to keep those accounts open. But when you don't use credit for a certain amount of time, the bureaus have nothing to go off of. So it's kind of like I always ask people, like if you had a bank and someone, like how would you know like someone's spending habits if they hadn't used any type of credit in over 15 months? Because like so much can happen in 15 months. You don't know how they're spending.
So if someone had a 580 credit score and they didn't pay their bills on time, mm-hmm. credit's kind of bad, maybe they had a bankruptcy, whatever the case. Mm-hmm. How would you suggest that they would turn around their credit in the most efficient and effective way possible to where they can purchase a car or a house in the next 6 months, say? Mm-hmm. What would your be like top 3 things that they could do to make sure that they get there?
Or could you give us an example account and say this person had a 600 credit score because they only had 2 accounts and 1 car and a house or something, and then this is what I did to get their score from 580 to 7 over 7 or something?
Yeah, so I've had a few credit repair clients that have some pretty crazy success stories. One thing that we can do is we can start getting accounts reporting to their credit. And what I mean by that is we can actually, if they are renting, we can get their rent to start reporting through a place called Rent Reporters. It's like $10 a month. So that would be an account. And then it sends, even if you live with your mom or like a roommate or something, you can set that up and it sends them a text message saying, is this person paying rent on time? They click a button, yes. And it gets it reporting to their credit. And so if you do that over time, you're tackling, number of accounts, mix of accounts, and then also history with there. So you're tackling 3 parts of your credit score, just that one thing. And you can also do like simple thing like Experian Boost, where you can actually report your utilities as long as you pay your utilities on time. But really where, credit repair comes in is there's so many consumer protection laws behind the consumers is really like finding out the specific case. Like bankruptcies are not as easy to remove as say like a late payment. And that's going to take more time to remove than a late payment. But let's say that late payment is reporting, but that lender did not necessarily report it correctly. So what we can do is we can tailor the credit repair letters to that specific case. So, and then that's how, we send in the letters. And then that's how we would get those into the bureaus. And then we also send them to the lenders as well too.
So if the lender didn't report it correctly, I had this issue actually where in COVID they asked me if I wanted to be in forbearance, and I had called them and said, like, what do you mean? Can you explain what that is? Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the conversation, I said, no, I don't need this, but then they put my account in forbearance, and I didn't even know it because I was on auto pay every month. Yep. So unless I got a notification that it was, didn't get paid for some reason, then I wouldn't look at it. But they had put my account in forbearance for 2 or 3 months before I finally noticed it. And then I went and paid the balance for the past 2 and 3 months, called them and said, hey, I don't want this. And they said, okay, that was a mistake. But still going forward now, to get other houses and stuff, they see that and they say, hey, why was this on forbearance? So in that case where it was basically a mistake, what would you do to get the lender to correct that?
So what I would do is I would contact the lender, and because I'm assuming that the line was probably recorded. Do you know who the lender was? So just like a student, it was like a student loan.
It was a mortgage company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mortgage company. What I would do is, you can say that like if you have the documents to prove that you said that you did not want that in forbearance, what you can say, there's a couple different things you can do. You say that's not how it authorized and it's actually really messing me up. Unless you guys get this removed because I told you guys specifically not to do this, then we're going to take legal action. And depending on what they say, you can, go that route if you want to. But the other thing you can, like most of the time they'll say, because that's a pretty big mess up on their part. And when you're messing around with people's credit scores, like they don't take that lightly. So, and then what they can do is what they would have to do is contact the bureau and say that it was an accident. But what you would want to do is you'd want to get a letter in writing saying that like, this is the situation, this is what happened. And then you get, a manager or whoever to actually sign that document. And then you sign the document too. So then that way, like if it doesn't get removed, then that way you say, hey, like, and then now if you really want to like pursue legal action, now you have, an actual contract.
With your program or your classes that you offer on credit repair, is it credit repair classes? Is it how to build your credit classes? What's in the class?
So with the credit repair company, what we actually do is we have a software that will generate letters, but we actually also have a team as well too that will send in letters and work with you on how to repair your credit. So, but my credit course is actually, once we get your credit, to a certain place, I usually recommend above like, 680, 690 to actually start, like leveraging your credit. What my course does is teach you how to access, 0% interest credit to create income streams. Use 0% interest to, help you go from high interest debt to 0% interest to help you get out of debt faster. It's actually what I did when I first was learning about credit, because I just transferred, my high interest debt and just started throwing chunks at it, which helped me get out of debt a lot faster, which also raised my score too.
Can you explain that really quick? What do you mean transferred your high interest debt to what? To a low interest?
To a 0% credit card. So
how do you get a 0% credit card?
So you look for, there's 0% cards when you're looking up, you can just Google 0% interest. But what you got to be careful for is there's 0% interest on purchases and balance transfers, or there could be 0% interest on just balance transfers or just 0% on purchases.
Now, what's the justification behind that? Why would anybody give a 0% credit card?
Because if you're paying 26 to 28% on one credit card and you're paying the minimum payment, and it's how the interest on the credit card, it's calculated over the year. So you're paying 26% over the year divided by 12. So you're really paying whatever that figure would come out to. So if you're taking that 26% and you're reducing it down to 0%, now you're
but who would give a 0% credit card? Because obviously the banks want to make money on the credit that you're using. So who would give a 0% credit card?
So the 0% is only an introductory offer. So that's where you also need to take a look into that account as well too. So it's usually on the personal side anywhere from, I want to say like maybe like 9 months to even all the way up to like 21 months. So once that period offers, then it goes back to, it's really a way for the banks to get you to balance transfer to their card and hoping that,
You'll stay with them.
it'll expire. Yeah. But if you're smart, what you can do is you just balance transfer to 0% card and then balance transfer. Yeah. And you pay a small fee, but the fee that you're going to pay is like so significantly less than if you just made your minimum payment on a 26% interest credit card. So, and then too, there's a couple techniques that like, like I know how to, transfer like maybe like like if you have high interest student loans, maybe like 11-12%, you can transfer a chunk of that over to 0% credit card and pay less in interest, and kind of that's a whole different strategy. But
you have to have a 680, 690 in order to do that, right? Like they probably won't give you, credit card companies won't give you a chance to get a 0%.
It really just depends. It's and what you can do. You can even do some credit research as well. There's sites out there that one of them specifically is credit boards. So you can see in your state, in like your zip code, on what bureaus and what banks someone got approved for, and it shows their credit score, what their limit was. And I've seen people get approved on the Amex Gold, which a lot of people think is like a really crazy credit card. Approved like 640, 650. So it's really just kind of like depending on case by case, and like what your relationship is with the banks and everything like that.
So could you, did they have a limit on how many times you can transfer? Like, let's say you transfer your debt and then your 9 months is coming up and you transfer it to another 0% and then you transfer it to another. Did they see that trend that you're doing, or is there any limitations on doing that?
So really what it looks like is, so let's say, so I had a Chase, I think the Chase Freedom Unlimited that I was like carrying like, I don't know, 26. It was my first credit card I ever had. So the interest rate on it was real high, but I never knew how much interest I was actually paying by paying the minimum monthly. Cause the minimum monthly was like, $45, $50, but I didn't know the interest on that was like half. So I'm paying like half the interest, and all the balance is going to it is $25 on a $50, minimum payment. So what I did was I opened up, I think it was like a Citi or like a Key Bank 0% interest card that was for like 15 to 18 months of 0% on balance transfers. And then I balance transferred it from Chase to Key Bank. But what it looks like is Key Bank just sends the money over to Chase, and then now you take that balance on the credit card. So it pays the credit card off, which can also kind of help your score too, because it shows that you paid off an account.
And you're still, like you mentioned earlier, you would still, buy a little bit of something on these old credit cards just to keep them active.
Like a pack of gum
or whatever, and just
Monster
utilize them very
or whatever.
minimally, but still use them a little bit just to keep that active.
Mm-hmm. Because the benefit that you're doing to that, and the way that you really want to look at it is, if you guys had a bank and someone came to you and they needed money and they had, 5 or 6 credit cards and 2 auto loans and maybe like a mortgage and, student loans, everything was paid on time, their credit score was 740, 750 versus, person B that walks up to Bank of Bree that wants, credit, and they're still 740, but they've only had, on-time payments on one credit card for 6 months. When you're reviewing like both applicants, like who would you feel more confident in giving money to? And it's really kind of the same concept. And because what it did for me was, I know it's going to sound kind of crazy, but when I first learned about credit, I think I got something like 10 or 11 credit cards at the same time. But really what that did was it tackled the amount of accounts that I have. And I'm not saying that people should go out, and I'm not giving like any advice or anything. I'm just telling you like what I did. So I'm get the number of accounts. I had my student loans. I had an auto loan. So right now I have at the time I had like 13 or 14 accounts reporting to my credit. In my history, I think it dropped down to maybe like 3 years or so. But now let's say that so history is calculated if you have 10 years of history on one account and then you open up another account. Now you have 2 accounts and your history drops down to 5 years. So for me, I have, 13, 14 accounts, whatever it is. If I go to open up a new one, my history right now is maybe I think like average like 4 or 5 years or something like that. So if I open up a new account, my history is only going to drop down to 4.75. So it's not going to be affected as much as that. So the history is still growing strong.
More accounts is beneficial in regards to like the history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, appreciate you coming on, man.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
I learned a lot.
We learned a ton too.
So-
That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think I more so learned. More
I don't
from
know.
you guys than
I don't know.
maybe
No.
tell you guys. But
Well, you can also find us on our, if you want to learn more and have more interactive conversations, friend us up on Facebook in our private Facebook group. It's Wealth by Real Estate. Check us out on Instagram. It's Wealth by RE, or on TikTok. Bree blew up recently on there, so check her out. That's Wealth by Real Estate as well.